Hello, everybody out there in Spark Festival land. My name is Deborah Young, and I'm the CEO of the RegTech Association. A little bit about me just before we get started. My career has been as diverse as RegTech. I've covered such areas as risk management. I've been in advocacy for a long time. I'm passionate about connecting communities and making commerce happen. And I've done this in a number of areas, including investment banking. I've worked in venture capital and private equity, and technology has also had a look in. But it's actually the intersection of technology and people that are my point of passion. And so that's the perfect foundation for us to start our discussion today. And on a personal note, I'm a mum of two boys, and I'm also a part-time sourdough baker. So I like to balance my world of tech with a little bit of flour and water just to keep it all real. So hopefully the tech is all going to come together for us today. There we go. It's all working. Fantastic. So what's on our agenda? I wanted to first of all start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. And in my case, that is the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and offer a warm welcome to all of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander friends with us here today, and a warm welcome to all of you. I'd also like to acknowledge the team from the Spark Festival and from the New South Wales Government. These are very challenging times that we find ourselves in right now, and it's absolutely a fantastic effort to have pulled together such a fantastic array of sessions that started yesterday and are going to go on over the coming days. So well done to everybody there. And Spark have set a theme for today, which is actually about finding impact and purpose. And our conversation today, I could find no better theme for what we're about to talk about. So I'm going to start with a little bit about what's RegTech anyway, and then I'm going to hand to one of the association's members, Jackie Nelson from Dekko Secure, who is actually going to bring some of what I'm going to talk about. She's actually going to bring that to life and unpack what some of that human element is and what happens if we don't get it right. And she's got some case studies to share with us. And then we'll finish off with some of what we hope will be very lively Q&A. Thanks. Okay, so we can get the slides to work.
See if I can do it for you.
Oh, there we go. It's okay. All good. So when we think of regulation and compliance, I wonder whether a lot of people think it's not very exciting or sexy. And regulation and compliance is not really what I'm thinking about when I'm, filling in my uni applications. I might think it's a bit boring. And actually, anyway, what has it all got to do with me? And so these are questions, or these are common things that I'm about to take a bit of a deeper dive in. Regulation and compliance when using good tech is the new black. And I disagree with some of those statements on the previous slide by saying that I believe it is exciting and sexy. And the goal for many people filling in their applications right now is they're going to be pretty keen to work with data and the exciting things that you can do with data. And the good news is that RegTech can help coordinate that data into meaningful and transparent information. And regulations and compliance, the reason I think it's the new black is that this is the way that we can actually help the system stay safe. So what's it got to do with you? Well, I think it's got a lot to do with you, even if you don't know it. So today I'm going to let you know on some little secrets. And first we're going to talk about regulation and compliance technology, what it's all about, why it's the new black, and why we need to make the connection between tech and people. So what you see on this slide are people who make the rules, who are the government and the policy makers. The people who monitor the rules, who are the regulators. The people who must adhere to the rules, who are the licence holders or the regulated entities. So by that I mean, if you think about banks, financial institutions, it could be telcos, it could be energy companies, it could be real estate, it could be construction. So any industries that actually have some kind of compliance requirement with regulations. And then there are the people that are reducing the friction between all of those parties, and we call them RegTechs. And one of the things that RegTechs seek to do is ensure that the whole system remains safe and offers a reliable service to everyone. It also helps, RegTech helps people do a better job, and in doing so, protect your mum, your dad, your brother, and your sister. So in short, this is creating a trusted environment for everyone to operate within. And then I want to introduce you to a special person, if that's going to come up on my slide. Oh, there we go. There's my superhero. And I'm going to introduce you to my superhero shortly. So the first of today's little secrets is actually RegTech and a little bit about the RegTech Association. So we were established in 2017 as a non-profit entity, and it was started by a small number of RegTechs, that is software companies who specialise in the technology that facilitate or alleviate the pain points of regulation and compliance. And they wanted to push for a closer collaboration between regulators and government and financial institutions. So we started with about 10 companies, and we are now a community of 150 organisations. And to give you some idea of some of the organisations, they are Microsoft, as an example. We've got global consulting firms. We've got 3 of the 4 big banks and many other institutions. And so if you are a RegTech out there and you're looking at being able to fast track your relationships with these parties, get in touch with us, because we've been able to help hundreds of companies get visible to the stakeholders that matter to them. So the second little secret is that Australia is number 3 in the world in terms of RegTech product development. It might be quite surprising to some people. We fall right behind the US and the UK. And if you think about those countries, are world-leading countries in RegTech, but are also major financial centres. So Australia is pushing way above its weight in regulation and compliance. We have real strength right here in our own backyard. And I'm happy to report that 67% of those companies actually come from New South Wales. RegTechs are enabler of better processes and more transparent information, as I've already said. They can help companies make better business decisions and give their customers and stakeholders a more trusted service. Secret number 3, RegTechs are very diverse. They have solutions that solve for some of the things that I'm about to read out, and this is by no means a finite list, but to paint a picture. Some of these solutions solve for financial crime, money laundering, human trafficking, child safety, cybersecurity, digital identity, information discovery, conduct and culture, marketing and product compliance, education for licensing, financial advice, privacy, consumer data, and so the list goes on. They are solving real-world problems and typically use technologies like blockchain, artificial intelligence, natural language processing, just to name a few. So it is a very diverse universe. But what's the commonality? The commonality comes in secret 4. They all share these things: productivity, efficiency, and trust. This is the one thing that they all have in common. And they can bring this to institutions, whether they be small, medium, or large. And while many have, in our formative stages, been focused on financial services, about 40% of our members have sector agnostic offerings and can be applied to any regulated industry. We are now going to talk about our secret weapon. And our secret weapon is actually our next speaker, who is actually going to wrap up everything that I've just said by telling you a little bit about herself, her organisation, and also presenting some case studies. So I'm very pleased to introduce you now to Jackie Nelson from Dekko Secure. She's a member of the RTA and also the founder and CEO. And they are an Australian RegTech company who commit to making the world more secure and connected, two of the things that I've just been talking about. And she's here to give us her angle on why this is so important, and especially right now that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and what's the human impact of not getting this right. So without further ado, I am going to hand over now and welcome Jackie Nelson from Dekko. Thanks, Jackie.
Fantastic. Thanks, Deborah. That was a very lovely introduction. And yes, I'm very happy to try and be the superhero today wearing a cape. So thank you to the Spark Festival for bringing us live today. It looks like a really great program, and look forward to actually watching all the content over the next couple of weeks. But today, as Deborah introduced, we're going to talk a little deeper now about RegTech and obviously the human impact. I'm obviously Jackie Nelson, the CEO of Dekko Secure, and we are an Australian startup cybersecurity company. I think we're a really great Aussie success story in the space. We have the great privilege of doing some very important work with governments, both at the state and the federal level, particularly with law enforcement agencies, and we work with organisations to help this intersection between technology, security, and human processes. And I think you'll see from some of the stories that I share with you today that there are some really significant problems to share in this space. And I'm certainly very proud of some of the work that we get to do and play the role in being part of it. So just to move into it, obviously in times like these, we're facing a really rapid shift in the way that we work and communicate. And we find ourselves increasingly concerned about really important issues like national security, obviously the privacy and integrity of our data as it now moves around really complex and interconnected ecosystems. We worry about global economic policy and, of course, our personal health and the state of the local economy. And given all of this, it's not unreasonable that a lot of us are feeling a deep sense of disorientation and fatigue. And for me, a great deal of this fatigue seems to come from the speed at which we had to suddenly retrofit our organisations as we moved rapidly to a remote working space. And the sudden shift to remote work saw many organisations and many of us personally clamber with the realisation that some of the legacy systems that we could once work around, when we were working in the office, were no longer going to be able to service. And quite simply, this means the manual hacks that we purposely engineered to circumvent some of the substandard technologies that legacy systems have left us with was certainly no longer an option in the COVID world. So obviously the ability, as Deborah highlighted, for people and technology to interface and work together is absolutely crucial to our successes as individuals, obviously as organisations, and then at the national level. And so I find it pretty disturbing that there has been a deep level of mistrust emerge in technology companies in recent years. And the Edelman Trust Barometer report that was released in January this year certainly highlights that trust in technology companies suffered a really significant loss across 28 different countries. The tech sector was the biggest loser across all industries, with the exception of entertainment and quite probably social media. So we know that a cyber security incident today will cause significant damage to our lives and businesses, and it's well reported that the average cost of a data breach today is close to $4 million. And financial as well as reputational brand damage may make it almost impossible for some organisations to recover from a significant breach. So here we find ourselves today. Like we said, we rely on technology more than ever to protect our data and allow us to get our jobs done. But the sobering truth is we don't seem to trust the technology companies that deliver that technology to us. And I'm sure many of you out there have watched the recent Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. And if you haven't, I do urge you to watch it, because it certainly starts to highlight some of the failings of technology companies today. And especially given the fact that we feed them reams and reams of our personal data voluntarily, we have a really misguided belief that the information we share stays private and protected. And then, of course, we don't have to look much further than an incident like the Cambridge Analytica scandal that is reported to have manipulated a so-called democratic process. And this certainly highlights how shamelessly technology can be used against us. And so if this doesn't make us stop and start to realise that our data, our personal data, our organisational data, our company data are some of our very most important assets, then I'm not sure what it's going to take for that to happen. So in addition to our information being misused and abused today, there is now the added and omnipresent risk of sophisticated cybercrime. I was on a webinar just recently with David Koh, the Commissioner for the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, talking about this very global threat. And he shared a quote that I thought was actually quite apt. And he says there are only two types of companies today: those that have been breached and those that don't know that they're being breached. And of course, as a result of this understanding, we now face really profound challenges in this space, and it means that cybersecurity protection is no longer an option for organisations or us as individuals. It's certainly now an absolute necessity. And so to this end, the 2020 Government Cybersecurity Strategy Plan has put executives and boards on notice that they must absolutely mitigate cybersecurity risk. And we see increased regulation. We've heard a lot of noise lately about the critical infrastructure obligations and the changes proposed around that. And we see much tougher data protection laws on the way in the face of all of this increased cybercrime. So how do we fulfil our organisational obligations today when trust in technology is at an all-time low and we're reliant on technology to connect and help us connect and communicate more than ever before? Well, as Deborah mentioned earlier, to help us start to answer that question and perhaps think a little deeper about it, I'm going to share a couple of real-life stories that I think absolutely highlight the importance of us getting this intersection between humans, technology, and our cybersecurity posture in our organisations right. And I think you might get an understanding of exactly what can happen if we do, unfortunately, get it wrong. So the very first story I want to share, and this is one that every single one of you that's listening today, I'm sure, will remember, and it was the Link Cafe siege. And this was a terrible tragedy that touched all of us really deeply on the 15th of December back in 2014. Now, 3 people lost their lives that day, and we know that when an event like this takes place, it sends, shockwaves through the community. And of course, families are torn apart, and many of the people, obviously the hostages, and also the really important work that the first respondents do and perform in these kind of incidences mean that they carry a lot of very wounded, both physically and emotionally, into the future. So obviously in the months after the siege, there was a public inquest into the deaths that arose. And there were some really significant and important findings that emerged from the hearing. The inquest highlighted that the agencies that had to respond that day to help mitigate this risk faced some really serious communication challenges. And the state coroner, one of the findings of the report was that the use of multi-information sharing systems and databases used by various law enforcement agencies that day that were responding to the siege was not ideal. It resulted in information not always being available in a timely manner or being disseminated in a format that would make it most useful. And such deficiencies have the potential to degrade operational effectiveness. And so obviously in times of crisis, it's absolutely critical that our infrastructure allows for totally secure systems and that they allow for the timely sharing and transfer of sensitive and confidential information. And as Deborah spoke about before, these technologies have to eliminate the ongoing risk human error can pose today, and the technologies that enable this must be reliable, they must be capable, they must be trusted, and they must always be totally secure. And the second story is in a similar vein, which involves a really tragic domestic violence incident that occurred on a cold and rainy day in 2017 on the east coast of Australia. This resulted in a mother and a daughter, unfortunately, losing their lives. And domestic violence is an incredibly complex space. And while there are a multitude of factors that contribute to this current epidemic, one can never, ever understand or forgive a systemic failure in the process of trying to protect these vulnerable people. And so the New South Wales Domestic Violence Death Review Team report that was published in 2019 cited, amongst other things, that greater information sharing between the government and the NGO sector could improve and hence prevent some catastrophic outcomes. It's also highlighted that the inability of agencies to share and communicate critical information in a secure and timely manner can often mean signs of imminent danger are missed. And so these stories are obviously both highly emotive and tragic, but a slight change of gear actually sees us explore some of the challenges that the private sector also faces in this space. So every single day, organisations face events that don't always make the front page of the news, but nonetheless cause significant personal stress, damage, financial and reputational loss. And some of these organisations are the organisations that we rely on and trust the most. So a recent engagement with a really large building and construction organisation highlighted the very real concern and risks organisations face regarding human error and more specifically insider threat. So data loss isn't always just about bad guys hacking into our systems. Sometimes the threat can actually be sitting in plain sight. And after losing 2 consecutive tenders, there were some concerns about this organisation's internal security protocols. So they launched a forensic investigation and they uncovered the very sobering fact that an incentivised employee had been leaking high-value tender documents to an outside party. It obviously goes without saying that the cost of finding out about an event like this after the fact is a potential disaster for organisations. And of course, then it's imperative that organisations understand who has access to their most valuable data at all times, and also make sure they know that they have complete control and visibility over the sharing protocols in these organisations. So from these and similar stories, and I could talk all day about these stories, I have a whole war chest of them. What are some of the lessons that we can actually take from them? Well, I think the first one is that technology must be embraced to help us drive productivity and increase effectiveness without adding complex processes to our organisations. Most of us every day turn up to work with a very clear charter about just needing to get our jobs done. Information sharing is just one of the channels that allows us to get our jobs done. So we have to make sure that the technologies, like I said, are productive and effective. And then, of course, they need to be totally secure and reliable, secure to and and allow us to immediately share and transport critical information, especially when it is sensitive and confidential, and certainly when we know that lives are at risk as a result of this. But just before we start to wrap up, I'd just like to briefly revisit the idea of trust in technology. Now, there's obviously a lot of discussion in the market at the moment about digital trust, given the situation that we're on. Most of our lives are living inside our computers right now. So the Australia's Digital Trust Report 2020 highlights the role that digital trust is obviously going to play in attracting investment and driving jobs growth. But if we start to unpack the idea a little further, the idea of trust in technology is actually a bit of a misnomer. In fact, it's really a blind alley. Because what we do know is that trust really happens between humans. And of course, non-trust then implies betrayal. So technology obviously can't betray us in the true sense of the word, but it can certainly let us down and leave our expectations wanting. And I think the three stories that I just shared with you are great examples of exactly how we can feel this pain and be feeling very let down by technology. So obviously what we urgently need today are technologies that are reliable, that are secure, that are easy to implement and use, and are built by organisations that absolutely understand the business and human issue that companies face today. And of course, it goes without saying that these companies then need to be run by people that we trust. And I just want to finish on this note, actually, because I think it's a really nice place to finish. And this was Mike Pizzulo's quote to an interview that he did recently with ZDNet. And he said that for boards, leadership teams and all businesses that expect customers to hand over personal information, a line is now being drawn in the sand. You must handle it with the utmost care, take reasonable steps to protect it at all times. And when there are issues, which inevitably there will be in this environment, you must respond quickly. And I think it's not just good business anymore. It's now the law is probably a really good place to stop and hand back to DEBORAH and perhaps turn to some questions in relation to this. Thanks, DEBORAH.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks for that fantastic presentation, and I think it really does highlight that thing that I talked about right at the beginning, and that's that intersection. And you're quite right. This is actually about people, and so that intersection of trust, people, and security of information and technology. But maybe just changing gears for a second whilst we are waiting for some questions to come through. There might be a bunch of people on the line now who are entrepreneurs. They're starting out. They're wanting to establish perhaps their own RegTech business. And I'm just wondering what words of advice you might have for entrepreneurs, given that you've been treading this path over the last couple of years. What advice you might have for people wanting to establish their own firm?
Yeah, well, look, I think the first thing is you have to deeply understand and deeply care about the problem that you're solving in the space. I think the second thing is become a member of the RegTech Association.
Nice.
Look, it's all about actually deeply understanding problems and caring about it. And that's where we talk about being able to trust the companies and the people that build the technology. It's not just about setting up a company and going and find a market for it. It's actually deeply understanding that a problem exists in the community today, and we can certainly find plenty of them in the digital space and absolutely in the cybersecurity space, and then doing your research and getting really clear about the problem that you want to solve, and then get about doing it.
Yeah. So let's assume for a minute you've done all that. What are the greatest challenges, do you think, for a business like yours to get traction? And some of the case studies that you've presented, are those groups your primary customers? Would be government as an example, construction industry. If you can tell us a little bit about, is your solution sector agnostic, and what are the challenges to get traction?
Look, great question. Thanks, Deb. Our system is system agnostic. We basically we allow organisations that have sensitive and confidential information in any sector that you're worried about the ability to be able to share and collaborate securely. With the onset of COVID and obviously the remote working situation and a lot of challenges around video conferencing, we had a great opportunity because of our deep technology and our tech capability here in Australia to build a totally sovereign secure video conferencing platform. So that's been really great to be able to help some of our most important agencies in this land address some of the challenges that they had in relation to video conferencing and doing everything online. So looking at all sectors is really important. What are the big challenges? Obviously, as an Australian cybersecurity company, we go head to head with a lot of the big American players in this space. I think COVID's actually seen a real shift for Australian technology companies, and I hope this is true for all technology companies, not just in the cybersecurity space. And I do believe that I know that the government has a very strong commitment to driving sovereign capability in technology. And so we've seen this nice shift to organisations actually wanting to deal with companies that are Australian. Interestingly enough, our video conferencing platform is all about security, but the last dozen inquiries that we've had have actually been from people that have said, actually, I just want to use an Australian-based piece of technology when I'm sharing data in this country. So I think there is a nice shift going on for us, but obviously the biggest challenge is trying to cut through the noise of some of the bigger players, obviously trying to represent value, trying to help your key stakeholders understand that procuring you is worthwhile, is viable, and that they are in a safe pair of hands. And so I think it's actually about the way it's all about all the work that you do before you come to market. It's about making sure that the technology you build is built with integrity, and all of those key pieces around trust, I think, is where it's at.
And what about greatest opportunities right now? Are there some industry sectors that you could call out to say that you think that they are an opportunity, or is there some other opportunity that you think is emerging right now, and in particular because of the pandemic, which I think, you're quite right. We've seen this elevation of RegTech and elevation of cybersecurity and all of that kind of stuff over the last couple of months has really emerged with all of us working in this remote way. So I'm just wondering, what are the greatest opportunities that you see right now?
Yeah, well, look, there's a lot of opportunities, obviously. I think the medical sector is really interesting. I think we'll start to see, we've seen certainly in the space that we're in cybersecurity, we're obviously seeing a lot of engagement from government organisations, which is fantastic. Law enforcement agencies, of course, are all over this stuff and at the forefront of worrying about security. And I'm incredibly encouraged with the commitment inside these agencies and their commitment to actually improving processes. They've certainly been listening to some of the findings that have been going on in relation to some of the cases that I spoke about, which is really great. But I think there are certain sectors that haven't actually been able to make this shift to the technology space so easily. I think the medical sector still has an enormous amount of work to do. We are definitely, once again, starting to see that they are starting to shift and to understand how sensitive and confidential the information they do share is. But I think there's a lot of work to be done in that sector. So obviously, they're bound by a lot of regulations as well. So it all needs to fit back together. But
Yeah, no, for sure. So what's your one wish for the future? If you're a superhero. So what's your one wish for the future?
Look, I honestly, I'm working in this cybersecurity space, really, really passionate about this space. I really, really want every single organisation, especially the Australian companies and global companies, actually looking to build technology now to think about security first. So it's very easy to think about solving a problem and doing it with that technology. And of course, that has to happen. That's really, really important. But if we keep building systems that are inherently insecure, we're never ever going to get ahead in terms of the cybersecurity race, and some people will describe it as warfare, and I think it's now the onus is on technology companies when they're delivering products to market to absolutely think about security first, and then of course the pressure goes back to the customers to actually demand that organisations think about the safety and the security before they think about anything else. And the onus is on them to ask the right questions of organisations. So I think if we start to see there are some unbelievably great Australian cyber spaces out there, companies out there, technologies out there. We're really, really doing some really great stuff. And of course, we have AusCyber, the Australian Cyber Security Network, that helps promote Australian technology and companies, and they do a fantastic job of that. So I think we'll get there. But my one wish is that everybody, both whether you're building technologies or where you're looking to procure technologies, will really start to think about the security piece first. Yeah.
Well said. There was actually one question that came up during that, but I might answer it in this next little section. Do you have some questions for me? We're going to swap roles.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk more specifically about RegTech and some of the issues that you solve in RegTech. So I guess what makes RegTech different from FinTech? I mean, sometimes we might sort of confuse the two and think you're all trying to solve the same problem. But how would you describe the fundamental difference between RegTech and FinTech?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. And in fact, someone called Kim actually did pop a question on it, since disappeared, so I'm not sure where it went to, but it was actually also a question about what's the difference between SupTech and RegTech as well. So I might answer both. So RegTech, we would say, is any technology which is alleviating the pain points in regulation and compliance. And by its nature, RegTech is actually an enabling set of technologies, and it can work with a fintech. So we would say that generally fintechs tend to be a range of disruptive technologies to traditional banking, and we'd say that RegTech was a little bit different in that we can kind of slot in anywhere to enable. And how is it different from SupTech? Well, actually, we would say that SupTech and RegTech are actually really the same thing, except that it's applied with a use case of regulators. So it stands for not soup, but supervisory technology. So that is technology that regulators may use in their monitoring and oversight activities, but in actual fact, the kinds of technologies would be very, very similar to what we use in RegTech. So I would say that they are kind of the same.
Yeah, they probably they're all sort of trying to solve similar problems and just come at it from different angles. Right. So that's really important. So from your experience, I know you spend all your time, Deborah, talking to RegTech founders. You're incredibly passionate and a fantastic advocate for the space. So of all the RegTech founders that you talk to, can you paint us a picture of what they actually might look like?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. And going back to one of my earlier slides where I said, somebody didn't sit there filling out their uni application going, I want to be a RegTech founder, but I'm hoping that in the future that will be the case. So what's super interesting about almost without exception, there's probably one exception that I can think of, but almost without exception, most of our RegTech founders are all ex-industry practitioners. So they have all worked in industry, or have worked in regulation or have worked in professional services where they have seen these greatest challenges firsthand, and they've gone off to found companies that have solved these problems. So actually what that means is a couple of things, is that they're generally quite experienced people. It also means they tend to have a more mature age profile as well, so they don't tend to be kids leaving uni. Um, and they also, because they have actually worked in the space, they also tend to have a very, very strong B2B kind of experience and background, which means that if you're talking to a RegTech firm, there's a reasonably good chance that they are going to understand the very challenges that you are trying to solve for if you are a regulated entity. So I'd say, all in all, very mature, experienced group of people, that I consider myself very lucky to have found myself in the midst of. And there are people who are very passionate, and so my passion actually gets driven out of the passion of the people that I see around me, who are very passionate about solving some of these problems, Jackie, that you so eloquently highlighted in your case study.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, isn't it? Because it really does. It comes back to that point about really deeply understanding the problem that you're solving, and caring about it. And certainly with industry first-hand experience, that certainly means you can bring a lot to the table in terms of delivering the solution. So that's great. So the RegTech Association has amazing programs. I think you and your team work tirelessly at delivering value across all of the sectors that sit underneath RegTech. So can you tell us a little bit about some of the programs that can help founders, that connect with potential customers and regulators? I certainly know that through these channels, working with RTA, I've had connections to customers happen organically, and they've been really great connections, and we've actually gone on to solve some really significant problems. So if there's any founders out there wondering about RTA and some of the programs, could you share some of the programs that would be helpful?
Yeah, sure. So we run an education program that we call RegTech in the Bag, and so it's kind of a little bit of what we covered today, but we take a bit of a deeper dive. And then we have another range of programs called RegTech Open for Business, and they were designed as a direct result of the pandemic to prove the points that there's no time to take your foot off the gas. This is the time when you need to progress with your digital transformation journey. And thirdly, we run a range of programs called RegTech Edge, and they offer our software vendor members an opportunity to answer a problem statement, and they will come and present against that problem statement. So we're actually able to then bring in the potential customer base to hear those series of five-minute presentations. We're also working on some pretty groundbreaking work with one of the big four banks at the moment, where they've actually they've given us their two problem statements, and we've gone out to the market to say these are the problem statements that they are trying to solve, and they are very committed and motivated at the moment to see all of the potential possibilities for what's out there, and knowing that Australia has this rich source of RegTech. So we're working on basically a series of programs that we're going to run for that bank. And then thirdly, we are connecting the whole of the global ecosystem through a range of other activities, but also we hold an annual conference every year called Accelerate RegTech, and that will happen in March of next year. We're going to switch it up a gear and make that a virtual event, and we're very, very excited. So watch this space about what we're going to do. But importantly, underneath all of that, we're actually also creating research pieces, because with any advocacy that we do with government and the regulators, we need to back that up with what are the facts. And so we also have a function where we do research for the industry, and then that informs our policy and advocacy platform. So I guess they're the main functions of the association. And our door is open to have a chat with people about how they think they might be connected with us, and how we might be able to work together to collaborate.
Yeah, right. And that's great. I mean, there's so much work to do in this space, Deb, and all of those programs. So yeah, I would just encourage any founder who's interested in this space to certainly jump on and connect with the RegTech Association, because I've certainly, as a member, found had enormous value. And like you said, being able to understand and access those some of that research is really, really important. That's great. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you the cheeky question at the end. What's your one wish for the future? If you could wave your magic wand.
Yeah, so we talk a lot about digital transformation, and I'm hoping, a bit like you are hoping, that people think security and trust first. And I'm hoping that we can lose that terminology of digital transformation, in that this will just be a given that people think tech first, because this tech can really help people do their jobs, be more efficient and effective. So I'm really hoping that we'll lose that term digital transformation. I mean, we're still using it, and I still use it for now, but I'm hoping that we'll lose it along the way, because it will just be a given that we are operating in a digital way, and that also that we see regulators actually buying some of this technology, and that so that the association almost would need to pivot and be doing other things rather than manually running all of these programs. And in fact, just to overlay on top of that, one of the things that we're in the very formative stages of looking at is actually creating a RegTech marketplace. And that would be a way that everybody can come together in a digital way. So buyers, sellers, regulators can all come together 24/7. You don't need to wait for Deborah to get in the middle of that conversation. You can simply log onto the platform. If you've got a problem or you've got a solution to a problem, you'd be able to log onto that platform and actually have really good visibility over what the solutions look like, what the problems look like. That will actually help sharpen up the pencils on all of the solutions, and it will also help understand and from a government perspective, would also actually help everybody understand where the greatest problems and challenges lie, and then allow us all to be able to go at some of those with a more systemic approach, rather than everybody trying to solve little problems all on their own. So I think that there'd be a whole range of benefits. So let's one day stop talking about digital transformation and just do it and live it. And then the second thing is, let's get ourselves behind some kind of a marketplace that will actually enable it for everybody, and help everybody come together to collaborate a little bit more easily.
Yeah, I think digital transformation is actually here. You're dead right. We really are living it. And I certainly think COVID accelerated us to that space very quickly. But yeah, no, I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you on that one, Deborah. And I think the marketplace is a really great idea. But just one thing that you actually mentioned in that I think is super, super important is the capacity and the ability to be able to look, even for vendors, to understand what other problems are being solved in the market, and then potential collaborations, rather than, and that's got to then help the organisations procuring it by being able to put the right technologies together and mix them together. So I look forward to the news of that marketplace. I think that's a really great idea. Yeah, really great. Well, that was a really great conversation. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, it was indeed. It was indeed. So maybe just just in wrapping up, because I'm aware we've got 1 minute left, what are the two things that you would call out, maybe to leave people with to think about today?
Yeah, look, I think, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, I think it's going back to this piece of looking around. If you're inside an organisation, thinking about your cybersecurity posture, to take a long, hard look around your organisation at where some of the gaps might be in terms of sharing. Think about security first. Assess every piece of technology in your stack to make sure that that it is absolutely secure. I think that's the first thing, the message to organisations that I think is super, super important. And then to founders or startups out there working in this space, I think my piece of advice would be stay connected, tap into this really rich ecosystem that we have both in the cyberspace, in the RegTech space. Chat to as many people as you can, and let's work together collaboratively.
Great
And
work.
that's it.